Hello! This evening we are on the ground at Boonville in the US in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and we're taking a look at the Flying Iron P38 Lightning. So, full disclosure, I went out this evening and I bought all of the Flying Iron aeroplanes that I've never looked at in the past. So obviously last week you would have seen me looking at the Mark 9 Spitfire. So this evening I went and got the P38 Lightning and the Grumman Hellcat and the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the Focke-Wulf 190. So we will be looking at them one after another, and I'm going to try and look at them in the order they came out. Obviously, I've kind of ruined that a little bit by looking at the Spitfire last week, which came out after the P38 Lightning. But it's going to be interesting to see the progression of how Flying Iron have got better and better at building aeroplanes in the simulator. So, as I said, this is the P38 Lightning, and we'll have a look at it. So, this was their first go at an aeroplane in the sim. It looks pretty good, doesn't it? It's very, very impressive. The material modelling around the fuselage is very good. You see the way it catches the light. We've got the early morning light here at Boonville. I've put a modern fighter pilot in the cockpit. Obviously, you can get aftermarket pilots for Second World War aircraft for the simulator. I haven't bothered. And if we go and have a look around closely at the spinners and the propellers, they're very good, aren't they? The material, the textures are very high resolution. Okay, so yeah, P38 is quite an interesting aeroplane, isn't it? Just because of the layout, where the single-engine fighters of the era had the guns in the wings. Obviously, the P38 had them in line with the pilot, so the accuracy as a gun platform was kind of unparalleled. It had enormous range as well. I've read there's some interesting stories about the flight of P38s that took out, was it Admiral Yamamoto that they shot down? The reason that mission was such a success, or the reason they were able to reach him, was because somebody, when the P38 first came out, it was something of a failure because the pilots weren't operating it correctly. But once they knew about, operating the propellers and the mixture in the correct manner during the various phases of flight, it became an absolutely fantastic aeroplane with a huge range. Okay, so we've had a look around it. Let's go and jump inside. So we've got the default view, so let's go for the drone camera for a moment, just center out the drone camera. So we can see we've got controls all over the place. It's quite sparse compared to modern aeroplanes in terms of navigation equipment. So you've got, very basic gauges, and all you really have to go on to navigate is a compass and your wits or your brain to figure out where you are. But there is plenty of room inside the cockpit compared to a lot of planes of the era. So you would have had room to have a map out and check things along the way. Now you'll notice I've got tooltips on. I've got them on for a good reason. I'm going to show you why in a moment. Not one you might ever think of. But this aircraft is modelled realistically. If we overprime the engine, we've had it. We'll have to start all over again. So I'm going to try and start the engine without priming it, and then give it a minimal amount of priming if it won't start. So based on this being a nice warm day, we might only need a second's worth of priming. They're electric primers, so we'll see how we get on. So first things first, I'm going to remove the head tracking just for a moment. So we'll pull down the canopy, which will come back down over our head, and we'll close the latches either side. And then there's a winding handle in each side as well to lift up the side panels. Okay. So, first things first, let's go and remove the yoke out of the way and just show you some of the switch gear around the place. So we've got the master battery switch down here, which we'll go and turn that on. And we've got these priming switches. So you can see it, they said under primed. We'll come back to those in a moment. Down the left side of the cockpit, you've got the master switches for the fuel pumps. And then you've got the fuel tank selectors. So in line with other aircraft of this era, you tend to start the engines on the reserve tanks and then switch over to main once you've got the engines started. You've got the undercarriage lever there, you've got the throttles, you've got the propeller levers, you've got the mixture levers, and you've got the air filters. So there are several automated systems around the aircraft for things like the cooling flaps and the intercooler flaps, and you'll see those come into action all on their own as we get things started. So let's go and put the generators on and cover them up. And then we've got the magnetos over here. So you've got a magneto for each side and then a master magneto switch. So we'll go and turn magnetos to both for both sides, put the master magneto switch to on. Okay, so when we hover the mouse over these primers, you will see they say under primed, so you can dilute or prime. But if you over prime the engine, you basically had it for 10 minutes. You just have to open the throttles and let the aeroplane sit there, and you can go off and do something else for a bit and come back and then hope it's sorted itself out. It's funny, somebody in my family had a car that was a bit like that, where if you ran the engine and then cut it off within the first few minutes of it running and it hadn't come up to temperature, it would do the same trick and the car was dead for 10 minutes. Okay, so we're going to go 1001 and let go. We're going to go 1001 and let go. And it's saying under primed, still under primed. So we'll go a little bit more, 1001 and let go. 1001 and let go. It's still saying it, but we'll try it. Okay. So we've turned the fuel on. We need to go and put the mixtures to rich. Oh, actually, it probably didn't prime it because of the mixtures not being forward. There we go. That would explain that. It just shows how realistic this is. I hate tooltips, but I'm just using them in this example to show you. We're just going to crack the throttles open a tiny amount. Okay, so we'll try this again then. 1001, 1001, and it's still saying under primed. 1001, 1001. Yeah, look, it's so finicky. So we've got it right. So the way the starter switch works, you've got a switch that spins up the flywheel in the engine that will turn the engine over, and then an engage switch, which basically, locks that in with a clutch and turns over the pistons. And if you get it right, then the engine fires and you're happy days. So let's try it right engine first. So you can hear it spinning up. And we have a right engine. Let's try the same for the left engine so we can see the left engine out there. So we're going to push the switches away from ourselves this time. And we got a good start. Excellent. Like I said, it's taken me a while. I can go and turn those tooltips off now. We just needed to make sure so I didn't have to sit here for 10 minutes explaining to you what I'd done wrong. So if you do get problems with this aeroplane, that will almost certainly be the problem. Okay, let's go. You can hear me over the engines, can't you? Okay, so if I go and sit outside and have a look, you can see it's a gorgeous aeroplane. The animations on the propellers are really lovely. Okay, a bit of a tip for turning the aeroplane around. Oh, you'll notice as well. Actually, yeah, the air coolant flaps haven't opened themselves just yet, but they will. If you want to navigate on the ground, so I'm going to go onto toe brakes. Obviously, if you've got two throttles, you can map. So we can see you can speed up one throttle faster than the other, and that will help us turn. So you've got differential braking, and the nose wheel really doesn't do much of anything, so it's just castering. But in the simulator, if you just give it a little bit of momentum and then hold the brakes on, they've kind of coded it into it, so it will release the wheel on the outside of the turn to help you navigate. Yeah, so you can play games with the throttles. Well, that appears to be what they've done anyway. Okay, so if we go and jump back inside, give get the aeroplane lined up. Let's go and put the head tracking on now. We get lined up on the runway, and then I'll cycle the flaps just to show you their movement before we get going. Oh, and we have a car on the runway. Of course we have a car on the runway. Why wouldn't we? So, parking brake on for the moment. So I just wanted to show you very quickly, if we go and cycle the flaps, they're quite big. Also, on the leading edge of the wings, it has spoilers. Okay, let's go and see if we can fly this aeroplane, shall we? Let's just familiarise ourselves. So you've got manifold pressure, RPM, you've got the coolant temperatures, you've got the carburetor air, fuel and oil, amperage, they've got fuel pressures, and then you've got airspeed. Notice you've got miles an hour for airspeed, not knots. Altitude, we haven't calibrated the altimeter, let's go do that. So it's got a Coleman window, just like a normal modern altimeter. Okay, so it's pretty good. It's got, you know, of its era compasses, which are a bit useless, but good enough, and you can navigate fairly accurately with them if you practice. Right, so let's ease the throttles open. So I've gone for maximum power for the takeoff run. We can rotate and we're in the air very quickly. Come back off the power. So we'll go for about 35 on manifold pressure, and let's have a little play with the propellers as well, if we can get to them. So we pulled the RPM all the way back, look. If you look at the colour coding on here, we're just above the low level for it. But even running at such low RPM and manifold pressure, we're still doing 200 miles an hour. This thing is incredibly fast. So as you can see, visibility is absolutely wonderful. So just flying around the edge of the valley here at Boonville. Just level out. So yeah, look, it's almost up in level flight at minimum RPM and power. It's coming up to 250 knots. It's supremely fast. If you come back to 50% power, it's still going to hold the same speed. It's incredibly stable. Wonderfully stable. So let's have a look at this from outside now it's in the air. Oh, I didn't look outside when we ran the engines up on the runway to show you the flaps opening up on the underneath the engines. But it's all automatic. But you can see how stable it is. It's very, very easy to fly. Okay, should we go for a fast run along the runway? So let's go and... Oops, wrong one. There we go. So what's the speed doing? Coming up to 300 miles an hour. Edging towards 350 miles an hour. Like I said, it is fast. it's dropping back through 100 miles an hour, and it should fall over. We'll give it a kick of rudder to make it fall over. And we'll come back across the airfield. Like I said, it's incredibly vast and incredibly stable. It's very, very good. Loop around and we'll do a stall test, and then we'll come back in for an approach in a moment. So let's just pull it up to a little bit of altitude over the valley, which doesn't take long going at these speeds. Let's pull the propellers back a bit. So 150 miles an hour, pulled back to 50% power. We're still climbing gently. We're not really losing much speed yet, so let's pull the throttles back to idle. So more and more backstick. We're holding backstick. It's just dropping below 100 miles an hour, and it's dropped the left wing, but it's very stable. So I maintained back pressure on the stick throughout that wing drop, and it didn't start to rotate. And to be honest, I wasn't expecting it to. Okay, let's go back over the middle of the valley, and we'll do a turning stall just to see what happens. Now, both propellers turn clockwise. So let's see what happens. Let's see if we get a difference. So going full right rudder, or full left rudder, sorry, in the stall, is it going to fall in? Only very gently. It's not going to spin. Okay. It's very, very docile. I don't know whether that's because they've dumbed the flight model down, or because the actual aircraft was very, very stable. But it'll be interesting to go read about that. Okay, so we're just over 200 knots. We're going to spin around in a moment. We're bleeding speed off as we climb up over these hills over here. And we're going to turn back in for an approach. So let's go and get the gear down. So as we go, you can see the flaps opening up on the sides of the engine there as well. So flaps are down. Obviously you have none of those problems with the single engine aeroplanes of having an enormous Merlin or whatever in front of you. So it's very, very easy to approach. So we'll hold it just above the runway, and we'll see how we get on. So it's starting to sink. Open the throttle up a bit more. I'm aware that I haven't put the propellers back to maximum speed. So I'm just being a little bit careful about doing this. Yeah, it starts to sink at about 85 miles an hour. It's good, isn't it? Looks amazing with these propellers right next to us. Thankfully they've made the propellers look really good. Okay, let's see if we can... Yeah, if we accelerate one of the propellers and hold the brakes, we can spin the aeroplane round on its own axis. Very good. But then you have to kill the momentum with the dab of the opposite brake, or use a bit of alternate propeller. There we go. It just takes a bit of practice for ground handling, really. Either keep some thrust over the rudders, or use differential braking. I seem to remember having several model kits of the P38 Lightning when I was young. It's a huge aeroplane, isn't it? Much bigger than the single-engine fighters of the time. Obviously we can go and play games with winding the windows down as well. Try and park this back where we got it from. What are our chances of doing that, do you reckon? Okay, parking brake is on. So we should just be able to pull the mixture, shouldn't we? There we go. So, turn the batteries off, turn the mags off, and turn the fuel pumps off. I'm going to have to disable head tracking. I can't quite crane my head through 180 degrees to do this. And we ran all of that on the reserve fuel tank, by the way. So, just shows it's got quite a lot in the reserve tanks. Oh, obviously we only flew around for 10 minutes, so it didn't hurt it. But yeah, it's good fun. And it looks amazing. Very, very straightforward to fly. So if you've not really flown any warbirds and you were looking for something that was easy, although it's difficult to start, you can use Control-E, of course, to start it up, which will do it immediately for you. But if you want a bit of a challenge with, you know, meddling around with priming and firing at the engine appropriately, it's good. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. So that was the P38 Lightning in Microsoft Flight Simulator from Flying Iron Simulations. They've got, like I said, they've got it on sale at the moment, so do go and have a look on their website. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. See you again soon.